Last year, we made a video called Draft These 4 Rookies in every Dynasty League, and we put a guy on there with the name of Puka Nacua. Have you heard of him? I think you have. And so this year, we are going to try and attempt to call this year's draft sleeper with our 7 guys that we are drafting as sleepers in our Dynasty Rookie drafts. And look, are these the only sleepers we're drafting? No, they are not the only ones. These are just ones.
We can't give away all our secrets.
That's true. But these are our biggest secrets, and these are the guys that we want to talk about and highlight for you in today's video. Let's start with Javon Baker. A lot of people, I was on the fence. Like, is Javon Baker a sleeper or is he not? Because you've seen Javon Baker in a lot of rookie mock drafts we've done recently creep up into the mid-second round. No, more late second round than mid-second round. But late second round. Javon Baker, in my opinion, he borders sleeper or not sleeper. You would say he's probably still a sleeper.
Yes, just because of the hype of some more tradesy guys, kind of like Keon Coleman, who you know are probably going to go in the mid-second regardless. Xavier Legette, a lot of people are obsessed with him. And then obviously those running backs, those second-round running backs that are pretty much going to be baked into the second round of Dynasty drafts as long as they go day 2. And I think Javon Baker is a guy that you're just going to consistently see going no later than the late second. I would anticipate still early third. And I think he's going to continue to be a sleeper because there's always going to be the question mark of why did he transfer from Alabama and go to UCF, and it took that transfer for him to finally produce at a solid level. That blemish is always going to be on his resume.
Always.
And that, in my opinion, is going to be why I think he is a sleeper. I think there were a lot of circumstances that resulted in him transferring away. You've obviously seen this with other big schools before where players transfer away from those schools because they can't get playing time early on in their career, and they want to move up the depth chart to a different school to showcase their skills and their abilities. And for some reason, Javon Baker wasn't able to do that at Alabama. Was it because of lack of skill? I don't know, but based off what we saw at UCF and based off of the wide receiver play that we saw in Alabama over the last couple of seasons, it kind of makes you wonder if maybe Bama just kind of missed on him. Maybe he should have gone further up the depth chart earlier than they were willing to allow him to start producing there and get a lot of opportunity there. Maybe that was more an Alabama mistake. I don't really know. What I do know is that he put up 1,100 yards last year at UCF, 796 the year before, and that one transfer really resulted in him immediately producing. So I'm still optimistic about Javon Baker. I am optimistic that he could get potentially like third-round draft capital as well. I've seen him mocked as high as a second.
And that's kind of why I think he's a sleeper, because he's not really on everybody's radars right now, but I don't think he goes later than the third round in the NFL draft. You're talking about a guy last year that had 52 receptions for 1,139 yards. If you're doing the math, that is like 22 yards per reception. So he's definitely a down-the-field guy, and while he doesn't have a ton of straight-line speed, like he's not a Xavier Worthy by any means, he does have very good ball-tracking ability, and that makes him what I think could be a solid starter in the NFL. And I think if he ends up getting the draft capital, he's going to end up being a really good sleeper pick for this year's Dynasty Rookie. He's probably the most popular, by the way, of the guys we have here. Anais Smith is going to be next year, and Anais Smith from Texas A&M.
Take it away.
You'll notice that the trend with these first 2 guys and the trend with a lot of these guys is going to be that these are 4 or 5 year guys. Anais Smith in particular is a 5-year guy, and when you're looking at what he's able to do at Texas A&M, he was there all 5 years. He did his first year 22 receptions. His second year he had 43, and the maximum he got to his senior year was 53 receptions. 53 receptions for 795 yards and 2 touchdowns. So definitely, if you're an analytics guru, if you're a guy that's really looking at college production and saying this is what I'm going to look at to make my judgment about a player, then he's probably not a guy that you are looking at penciling in as a sleeper. But you're talking about Anais Smith being a guy that's not really even going in the 4th round right now. This is like more of a deep sleeper because, again, when you got these guys that aren't even going in Dynasty Rookie drafts before the draft, which just happens every year, they're not even on people's radar, and they sneak up to the 2nd or 3rd round. Anais Smith is definitely one that I think could end up sneaking up into the 3rd or 4th round. He's definitely a guy I want to take a shot on, just based on the fact that, again, his production profile his senior year, although he was a 5-year player, his production profile was fairly good. I think he's a fairly talented special teams guy as well, which is why I think that eventually a team is going to be willing to take a shot at him in the draft. And once he does, I just believe in the athleticism and the talent enough to where I think he's going to land somewhere to where he could be fantasy relevant. This is more of a 4th round sleeper in my opinion, but I'm curious your thoughts on Anais Smith if you have any. But
yeah, I think a lot of people this year are just looking for the next Tank Dell. And I'm here to tell you, as good as this class is, as deep as this class is, from a route running perspective, you're not going to get a sleeper like Tank Dell was last year. And guess what? We still missed on Tank Dell last year because of his size. We knew that he was a good route runner. We knew that he had good hands, but we shorted him because of his size. We were wrong about that. None of these guys have that profile, but what they do have, and they do have traits that Tank Dell didn't have, and some of that is going to be size for a guy like Javon Baker. Some of that is going to be, still really solid production, and maybe they only stayed for 4 years, or maybe they didn't stay for 5. Maybe they're not going to be 24 years old going into this year's draft. These are just kind of some targets that we think have an ability, have some upside, and were able to still produce in college despite some adversity that they had to face. And Spencer Rattler is another one of those guys who when you're talking about the talent, we're not... What are we going to say about the talent? What are we going to say about a quarterback who's likely going to go no earlier than day 2? And I would anticipate, I would still guess probably 3rd round. And do I think at the end of the day that Spencer Rattler is going to be a super successful NFL quarterback and be amazing and be some hidden gem that everyone totally missed on and he fell to the 3rd round and he's, the next Brock Purdy? No, I wouldn't bet on that at all. No. What I'll bet on is the value increase at some point in time. What we have seen over the last couple years, just within the last couple years, is guys like Desmond Ridder, Sam Howell, heck, even Malik Willis at a time. Even after he lost value, he ended up increasing value again because people thought he might start. And Hendon Hooker, even last year, he still held value when he went in the 3rd round. So
yes,
with Rattler, and Avery made this point too. He was saying, like, I could see a situation where Rattler is thrown into a starting role at some point within the next year or two when he's taken in the 3rd round to a team that didn't take a shot on a quarterback in the 1st or the 2nd, and they just went with Rattler and they're like, let's see if we can get something out of him and see if he could eventually be some sort of option. But with his production, like, it's been fine. He's never been well over 3,000 yards passing in his career. Played 5 years, 3 at Oklahoma, transferred because he was forced out by Caleb Williams. Remember, I mean, going into 2021, this guy was a Heisman Trophy favorite. And then Caleb Williams decided to steal the job, and he wasn't playing very well. Transfers to South Carolina, really matures, not just as a prospect, but as a person and a leader on the team as well. And I think a lot of people are attracted to that. His yards per attempt are fine, 8 yards per attempt, 69% completion percentage, 19 passing touchdowns, 3,100 passing yards. It's fine. And in the SEC, that's fine. What I will say with Rattler is when he goes 3rd rounds and when he goes to a situation like the Atlanta Falcons and Desmond Ridder a couple years ago.
This year would be like the Broncos. I saw an example where the Broncos took
and that would make sense.
They didn't take an offensive guy in the 1st round, and they waited until the 3rd round to take. Or if he goes to the Raiders, like, you really don't think Spencer Rattler will be in the quarterback competition with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell and the Raiders?
In Superflex leagues, does Spencer Rattler even need to produce close to a top 20 quarterback for him to increase in value and for you to ship him off?
Does he even need to produce?
No.
He doesn't even need to produce at all. This is a value play, guys. Spencer Rattler is going to be the 7th QB off the board, and so he's going to be significantly cheaper than all of the other quarterbacks. But odds are, so you're basically, and you're making these picks after the draft anyway. So if he goes to a team with an established quarterback and he ends up just being a pure backup, obviously that kind of changes our opinion of him. But what we think is going to happen, he's going to go to a team where he actually could compete to get some reps his first year and maybe get one of those, like, okay, the starter got benched, now he's going in. Like,
Pittsburgh would still make sense too.
Like,
actually.
What if New England didn't draft a quarterback? They rolled with Jacoby and they brought Spencer Rattler in to compete with Bailey Zappi. They tried, Jacoby Brissett. He got hurt or got benched, and then then as soon as he steps in the game and he throws 2 touchdowns,
right?
Boom. He's tripled in value and you're selling. It's a value play.
Yep. It's a value sleeper, not I think this guy is going to be have super high upside in the NFL kind of sleeper.
There is the off chance and the very small possibility that he does have upside in the NFL. This guy was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. He was very, very good. And while he didn't really pan out in college like we thought he was going to, it's not like the talent's not there. He's a very good passer. As a passer, he's a very good passer. Audric Estime is going to be next, and Audric Estime is a guy that we were really in on at the beginning of the offseason, and then we weren't in on him anymore because everybody got way too high on him and the combine sucked. But when the combine sucked, everybody went way too far the opposite direction.
Like,
So-
I'm not touching him ever
because he ran a 4.71,
low.
and yet, oh man, I can't wait for the comments. Oh, the NFL's not attracting me. Oh, 40 time doesn't translate to for running backs. 40 time is fairly important. There is a reason that NFL scouts highlight 40 time as the most important metric from the combine testing. It's because it actually does, in some instances, tell you more about a player than what you actually know. And for Audric Estime, historically, guys with 4.7 or lower 40-yard dashes didn't pan out. One of the slowest runs ever for a running back. And after this, everybody was completely out on him. So, and believe this if you want to, but as pro day, he ran a 4.58. And so that's over a tenth of a second faster. That's way better. That's way better for a
and that's
guy
what I expected
whose
at the
production
combine.
profile is 1,350 yards in his senior year with 18 touchdowns, 17 receptions for 142 yards. And it's a guy that has a good production profile, played on a good team against other good teams, came out, had a bad combine, and got completely written off. Now, Audric Estime, who is 5'11", 227, that's what he's listed on ESPN. I can't remember what his combine weight was, but it's a big guy. He's a big dude. He's now being slept on to the point where he is a good pick in the third or fourth round when you get there.
It's crazy to even say that he's a sleeper at this point because of how much value he held before the combine. And I think this is more of a situation where, like, we knocked Audric Estime too much for having expectations that were too high for him going into the combine. So he's fallen so far because of the disappointment, when in reality, we shouldn't have had those expectations to begin with. We are responsible for that mistake as well. We had very high expectations for him and thought that he could eventually be a top 4 option in this running back class. He's not at this point. But with the talk of Audric Estime and with his skill set, Audric Estime's skill set has not changed. We knew that he wasn't going to be the most explosive, shifty running back that was going to, blow past everyone on a defense and get 80-yard touchdowns every other play. Like, that's not the type of running back that he is. He's a guy who you would pair or put in a committee where he's going to get a lot of those short yardage situations, goal line opportunities potentially. I mean, I'm thinking Baltimore Ravens. Like, that's a type of situation that would be really nice, and it would actually make sense because Gus Edwards is gone. And Gus Edwards didn't have any draft capital relevancy going into the NFL, but he fit in a system specifically with the Ravens, and they utilized him even once Greg Roman was gone. They utilized him last year after J.K. Dobbins went down with the injury. So Estime is kind of a guy where you can take a day 3 chance on him if he goes 4th round. Like, don't be shocked if he goes 4th or 5th round and ends up in a situation like that. So
yeah. Jacob Cowing is our next guy on this list.
Yeah, Jacob Cowing is a wide receiver out of Arizona. Some of you may know who he is. Others may not. He's kind of... There's a lot of differing opinions on the guy because he's another... I don't want to say super late breakout because he started producing at a very high level his junior year, and he stayed for 5 total years in college. 500 yards as a true freshman, 600 yards as a true sophomore, 1,300 yards as a junior in 2021, 2022, 1,000, 2023, 800. His best year was as a junior. I think it's funny that he didn't declare early, but I think obviously the COVID year could have affected that in 2020. And obviously NIL is going to change a lot of things as well. With Jacob Cowing, he's a guy that, again, isn't ever going to... He can only go up boards so much because he's a guy coming into the NFL after playing 5 years. For sure. But that production alone, the touchdowns, the receptions, 90 receptions this year. Like this is, I love to see the versatility here because the 1,300 yards in 2021 was very, like, that was 9.6 yards per, or 19.6 yards per
He was
reception.
very big play dependent.
Yeah, and that was cut in half by the time you get to 2023, and you see him get more receptions, 90 receptions for 848 yards and 9.4 yards per reception. So you see him being more of a possession guy with 6 more touchdowns as well. Like, this is a situation where I'm like, I kind of see him, slowly improving his craft as a wide receiver. And again, given the right landing spot, potentially, I mean, I could see him go as early as late day 3. Would you be shocked if he went late day 3?
No,
we're talking about
either.
Xavier Legette going late first round, and he's a 5th-year guy, and he's only produced once in his entire career in college. I don't think it's unrealistic to say that Jacob Cowing could go day 2.
I mean, he's a guy that came out and ran, I think, a 4.38 at the combine was his best run. He comes in a little bit on the smaller side, so that's obviously a concern. I think he's 170 pounds maybe. But even with that, what you want to see out of those small guys most of the time, unless they have burner speed, unless they have 4.21 speed, what you really want to see out of guys that are that size is the ability to work out of the slot, command the middle to intermediate, short to intermediate range of the field, and get a lot of receptions. And that you saw him transform his game as he went on in college. So that's what gives us promise with Jacob Cowing.
Yeah, and this is the closest production profile that you're going to see that's as comparable to Tank Dell as possible, I think, in this class. Because Tank Dell, he had 2 1,300-yard seasons in his late years at Houston in college, and Cowing is going to be relatively close to that with that junior and senior season.
Kamani Vidal is going to be the next guy on this list. Another running back. This one's not really on a bunch of people's radars. And really, he wasn't on our radar either until we watched a Franchise Guy video, and he had him ranked higher than we thought. We started to do our research, and we're like, this guy could be a pretty solid starter in the NFL. This is an athletic dude. He ran a 4.46 at the combine. He had a 38-inch vertical jump, a 10-foot broad jump. I mean, he is athletic. This dude is a stud athletically. When you're looking at the production profile as well in college, he had 500 yards his freshman year, 700, 1,100, and then 1,600 yards on almost 300 carries his senior year.
Yards per reception, too.
Yeah, I know. Oh, and that's a big one. 14 touchdowns. We talk about the yards per reception threshold we'd like to see. It's 8 or 9 yards per reception or higher is usually what translates into the running back 1, 2, or 3 in the NFL. Or from a fantasy perspective. And he has 11.2 yards per reception, 18 receptions for 201 yards. From a production standpoint, this guy has the production profile of a stud. Now, he played at Troy, and obviously that's going to matter here. Playing against, he played against App State in the bowl, obviously, but playing against Western Kentucky, James Madison. James Madison was actually good this year. But Arkansas State, Army, Texas State. I mean, you're talking about the level of competition not being to the point where we can even consider him having played against NFL caliber talent. But that being said, we have seen recently some guys come from these mid-major schools, come into the NFL, and be productive, especially at the running back position. Kamani Vidal reminds us a lot of a guy we were hyping up from last year named Tyjae Spears. And Tyjae Spears, while he was a little bit more widely recepted by the Dynasty community, Tyjae Spears, kind of same thing. I mean, he was a guy from a smaller school. He was a guy that didn't play a bunch of elite competition.
And he had an injury concern as well.
But we knew he was missing an ACL. Right. But we knew he could come in and produce at the NFL level. I think Kamani Vidal is like this as well. And when you're looking at his size as well, he's 5'8", 213 pounds. So we'd like to see that BMI from him. We're not BMI guys, but it is nice to see. It's an added bonus. So he's got the size. The athleticism is there. The production profile is there. So he just marks a lot of things off for us that makes okay, if this guy's available in the 4th round, I definitely want to take him. Now, where he ends up going in the NFL draft, I think most likely day 3.
Day 3, yeah.
But it doesn't matter, right? I mean, we've seen running backs in the 4th, 5th, 6th round come in, carve out a role in an NFL offense year 1, and then they're rolling. Now, does it always pan out? Not always, and most of the time it actually doesn't. But at the same time, we're talking about playing the value here. Kamani Vidal, we think is going to be a pretty good value in the 3rd or 4th round of these drafts.
Yeah, and you remember the other big sleeper that we had at the running back position last year who went super late, day 3, that went to a small school? It was Dwayne McBride. Yeah. Dwayne McBride was out of UAB, and he didn't pan out. You know what the big difference is between Dwayne McBride's production versus Kamani Vidal's?
Yards per reception?
It's the yards per reception. It's the receiving upside. Dwayne McBride literally had almost none. Like legitimately dang near 0, 2 receptions, 2 total receptions his final year. It was crazy. Vidal has showcased his receiving upside and capability consistently, and that's something that I think an NFL team is going to want to bite on, especially in this day and age.
Yeah. And then our last guy here is Jermaine Burton out of Alabama. Jermaine Burton's a guy 3 years ago I drafted him in a Devy League because he was a pretty good prospect coming out of high school. He was going to Alabama. And when you're looking at what he did there over 4 years, 4 years at Alabama and you do 400, 500, 600, and 800 yards, you're like, yeah. And I get it. And to everybody's credit who does not like Jermaine Burton, it's not like Alabama's wide receiver room the last 3 years has been stacked like it was before that. So that is a good argument against it. And obviously, the yards per catch here, 20 yards per catch, 17, 19, and 15. He's been more of a bigger play guy. He had 8 touchdowns this year, though, and we like to see that. And so when talking about 40 receptions, 800 yards, 8 touchdowns, it's pretty decent production. He was a guy in games like against Auburn, had over 100 yards. He had some pretty good games earlier in the year, but in the bowl game, 21 yards. against Michigan, and then 28 yards against Georgia. At Texas A&M, he had almost 200 yards. So he had 200 yards on 9 receptions for 2 touchdowns. So you just see there's been some inconsistency with Jermaine Burton. By the time he got here, I would have figured he would have declared last year. 2 years ago, I would have guessed this. I would have figured he would have declared last year. I would have figured he would have put up on 1,000+ yard season in Alabama, and I figured that would have been it. And really, he just hasn't. And he's definitely flying under the radar because he was underproductive at Alabama, of all places. So because of that, you're going to be able to get him probably in the 4th round. And honestly, he does have a lot of natural ability. And going to a place like Alabama with that coaching staff and not developing into something really good, that is the knock, again, that people are going to use against him. He ran a 4.45 at the combine, I think 38.5-inch vertical, 11.1 broad jump. And again, I think Jermaine Burton, even when you're talking about at Georgia, wasn't productive enough. But you transfer, you've played against SEC competition at Georgia, you've played against SEC competition at Alabama. You have that going for you. You have some athleticism. We know you were a good prospect. Makes him a more guided dart throw in the 4th round than some of the other guys we're looking at in that range, where it's like, you're taking maybe a dart throw on tight end or running back. So, all right.
Right.
Those are our 7 sleepers we are highlighting this year. It'll be interesting to see how many of these pan out. Do us a huge favor. Yeah. Drop a like on this video, please. It really helps us out. And make sure you subscribe. Subscribe if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football, because we are like 600 subscribers away from 10.
Yeah.
Is that not crazy?
10K by May?
10K by May. Let's do it. 10K by May. Also, flockfantasy.com/domain. Links in the description. If you want a team blueprint for your Dynasty team, we'll help you with your rookie drafts as well. You get one-on-one rookie draft advices you go through. You get our rookie draft guide. You get our ADP database. You get our community Discord. You get all of it. So flockfantasy.com/domain. Use code domain when you sign up to get a blueprint and to get one-on-one advice. Appreciate you. See you later.